and a very, very informed technologist. And today we have a very exciting topic. So we're going to be talking about the future of digital technology for businesses in a digital world that is constantly evolving and lately especially gaining a lot of momentum. And I'm sure there are going to be many questions that a lot of us will have as well. So there'll be a question and answer sort of throughout, depending on where you're tuning in from. You can enter your questions in the chat box and we'll get to those throughout a little bit and also at the end if we have time. So we'll just get started now. I'll hand this over to Frances. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Kia ora, morena everyone, and wonderful to be here. This is one of my favourite things in the world to do, is to be able to talk about business and technology. So great to be part of this conversation. Just 1 second. And of course, I've also got hay fever. So the topic today is around looking at business and into the future and thinking about the types of tools, the types of practices, the types of people that we might need to really thrive in this world. And most of you be aware that AcademyX is the creator of Digital Boost. So we've been working with the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment over the last 2.5 years to bring you the Digital Boost platform and all the resources that come with that. And so over that journey of 2.5 years, we've had some incredible insights about what you're doing, the things that perhaps are scary or perhaps are not so sure about where to go, what to do. And so we want to be able to talk about some of those challenges, opportunities, and also things that maybe will be good to know as you're thinking about into the future and 2023 and obviously going into the next few years. There's a lot of change going on, and there's also a lot of things that are changing very rapidly, and some of those will be things like automation, personalization, generative AI, and so they're all on the table today. So we will have plenty of time to have your questions. And I will try to respond as simply as I possibly can. But if there's anything you don't fully understand, please just say, look, can you explain a little bit more? And I'll go into it in a little more detail. So, so the floor is really open between. So, Kat, I'm thrilled to be here with you. And we'll just go through some of the things that we often get asked and talked about in the space of Digital Boost and the SME industry, the small medium business community across Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the first things I think that would be really, really awesome to get started with is in the last few years, in the move to embrace digital, there's been a significant focus on businesses across the world. Are there any specific sectors where the move to digital has been more significant than others that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, there has been, and I think the obvious ones were sectors where there was going to be, or there was significant disruption through COVID. So anyone who had a retail store, they could no longer access their store, hospitality, and particularly around fast food and restaurants where they were, people still wanted to be able to have the luxury of having takeouts, but it didn't necessarily have the ability to go and pick it up. And so where we had deliveries or sort of arm's length distance pickups, there was also services that became really incredibly important through COVID. So booking, for example, with your GP or booking for vaccines, or it might have been connecting in with services that you needed. So they had to become very rapidly digitized. And in fact, even Digital Boost itself is a product that got developed because of COVID. And it was actually in 2020 when MB recognized that the small and medium businesses that were flourishing, or at least able to continue, were those who had the highest amount of digitization. And so Digital Boost itself was a product of COVID, which then of course grew into a sort of a product that was really of its time. And so when we think about services, it's really saying, if your service can be packaged and it can be what we call productized, it really should be online and available for someone to easily be able to click and put it into a shopping cart. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something tangible, for example, as a grocery order or a takeaway, or a new skincare regime. It could be a service like a house wash that people should be able to go and book for that house wash service, book the time, have the information, and potentially pay for it all up front. In the same way you might do with a hairdresser. And I'm sure many of us, back when hairdressers became available again, after COVID, when it was actually something where we could go back to a hairdresser, we were very quick to go to the ones that had booking systems, because we really wanted to reassure ourselves that we would get a spot. And so it's that service piece that I think often gets missed. People think, well, I don't have a tangible product. I'm not selling a product in whatever form. I'm not selling stationery. I'm not selling, beautiful packaged honey. I'm not selling bespoke shoes. So why would I have an e-commerce platform? When we start looking across sectors, it really is now the time for other sectors. And we've been doing quite a big push on Digital Boost, thinking about, for example, construction and services around construction. So if you are anything from building a house to manufacturing windows to the local plumber, those businesses, while they've been thriving for many, many years, as soon as you get a recession, when things start to slow down and discretionary money becomes tighter, people start surfing a lot more. They haven't got the same pressure to be able to go, well, I'll just take whoever I can get. They start being shopping around on price. So if they can go to one plumber's website and see a very clear price for a service, and clear what's their cost for a call out fee, what's their cost for travel, what's the minimum cost it's going to be, and another website doesn't have any information, you'll always find that people will go with the one where they feel like they know what they're getting. So the content they make, they've got a pretty good idea about what the cost and service is going to be. Yeah. So going back to the question about which sectors, in the last few years, it has been very much driven by people selling products. But I think we're now into the place where everybody selling a product should definitely have digitized to the point of having an e-commerce website. But now if you've got a service, even if it's a very large ticket item or something that people want to potentially try before they buy, and that could be something like buying a bed. Like you would say, well, most people would want to go and test a bed before they buy it to see if it's the right comfort level. But actually, increasingly, people, are willing to buy things like beds without testing, or they will buy online after testing in the shop. So they shop around, they find the bed they like, and then they say, well, who sells this sleepy head bed for what's the best price? So then they're doing that price comparison type of shopping. So those are the big ticket items. Cars, we're seeing some companies only sell cars online now. So you book online, and some of the, particularly around electric cars. And then you have, on the other hand, these services. So it could be, quite a very significant service of something that's worth tens of thousands of dollars, but people still want to know, what is your general cost, and can I put that into a shopping cart? And in fact, I'll give you an example from this morning. I actually was looking last night for people who sell volcanic rock. And there's not very many people. So I went through and sort of shortlisted. And the one that I put a query through was, even in their shopping cart, they allowed me to put a query. So I could put an order for 1 cubic meter with a query about prices for more. So I wasn't paying for it, but it actually went into a shopping cart to say, I'd like some of these. How much are they? Can you come back to me? So it's something I wouldn't have thought of a few years ago. I would have had to pick up the phone and call them, even though it was, early in the morning before they were on open or over business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, like, as the demand for that kind of process as a customer or as a user has grown so much, like a lot of the platforms that are now offering that kind of checkout process or inquiry process or booking process, they're so customizable now as well. So you can keep, your brand language throughout, which is really cool. What I wanted to know is sort of, as if you're sort of a business that's been doing you've been doing your thing for so many years and you're looking at digitizing now, what do you think is where do you start? What's the most important move that you should make as a business looking to do that?
I think the very first thing, if you're a business and you've got no digitization, I would definitely start with an accounting package. So, we have 2 very good ones within the country which are widely used, with Xero and MYOB. And the ease of which accounting can be digitized in the cloud just takes away so many pain points from, your GST, can integrate with PAYE systems. You can put aside your payments for your provisional taxes and things you might need. But it's really the invoicing and chasing up on invoices and automating that process of, the invoice goes out. If someone hasn't paid, they get a reminder to pay. A lot of the time, to find time to chase an invoice, or even to get the invoice out to someone, becomes quite problematic for a lot of businesses. And of course, then cash flow gets compromised. And the reality is, right now, when we have, again, a slowing economy, people will be slower to pay. There'll be less money flowing around. So people will potentially, what you might have had in a 20-day accounts and hoped most people would pay on time, you may find that starts to kind of creep. And so if you have a system that actually reminds customers or your clients that actually there is an invoice due and it is now overdue, it's a pretty good prompt for a lot of people, because most people don't deliberately pay late. They just get caught up in what they're doing, or the invoice is coming late and then they go late, and then the whole thing, suddenly the payment you expected last month is a month later, and that puts real pressure on, particularly if it's a big ticket item. So that would be my very first thing. Depending on how many people work for you, some form of payroll system, again, unless you love that process, it really is great to have one. And there's a multitude of them and integrated into these cloud accounting systems. And it just means that you're not having to think about the right, what's the pay rate, what holidays act, you're not having to think about taxes and who pays what and where, things that take time. And, there's very few people I ever meet who love doing payroll. It's a few and far between. And so let's put it in the hands of people who do love it, and they have, they do it. And it's a pretty low cost. It's certainly a lot lower cost than if you're putting, numerous hours a week into doing that. Probably makes more sense though if you've got, I would say, 3 or more staff at that level. Even the Holidays Act alone with changes, we have another wonderful holiday this Friday with Matariki, and that changes things again. What's the rate if people have to work, and if they're not working, and how does that all work? Find a way to do that. And then I would say a website. So some people would say website first. A website is only worthwhile developing if you're really going to invest in it. What we used to call a brochureware site, which is a static site which might have information that is so generic it doesn't have any time sort of capsule relevance. You're not sort of going in and saying, oh, I can tell that, we're going into a new season, or I can see the things on it are showing from something that happened last week, or a sale that's currently on, or there's some reference to make people feel like it's a fresh and alive site. If they go in and it just feels like the site looks like it could have been there from a year ago with nothing new, or worse still, it talks about a special that closed off 6 months ago, or it has a product story about a customer and it's dated in 2019. And those sorts of sites actually are probably not worth doing. You'd be better off just having yourself on Google and making sure your business is discoverable on Google. So you have actually put yourself on the map, get yourself a business profile on Google, which is free, put your office hours and your contact details there, because at least then if someone is Googling your business, they will find it through the Google search and actually have no website. If you have got the time and energy for a website, then that will become probably your biggest channel to market. It's the first place people look. It's probably the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth place people look when they're looking for types of products that you're selling. So I really would say, but treat it like a shop front. And in many cases, we have seen people have closed down their shops or their businesses, their physical footprint, to work from home and use e-commerce, or at least a website, to be the main channel to new customers, because it's obviously it can be relevant for people anywhere in the country or across the world. So it's a really wonderful reverse channel. You can find things globally, you can send things globally. So definitely in those three, that order would be the way that I would think about when you're getting into a business.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that the same for sort of no matter what sector you're in, or does it vary depending on what industry, what sector you're in business?
Yeah, it does. I think so. The accounting one, I would say, is common to every business. Unless you really do know accounts and you love so you love the P&Ls and you love running spreadsheets and cash flow forecasts, then I think definitely accounting is a package for everyone. The payroll would depend again on the size of the business. And for example, if you were running a horticultural business, you have lots of seasonal workers, then it becomes even more important, because there's complexity with paying seasonal workers and casual workers versus someone who's full-time employed, because there's changes. It might be hourly rates are different, or they might have set hours, flexible hours, and you're having to keep track of it. So that would still relate. The website is probably where you may or may not. And the may not would be if you're running a horticultural business and you're selling apples wholesale, say to Turners and Growers, you may have a website at that point just to hold the name and to have a basic information of how you can be contacted and where you are. but actually you probably wouldn't have a need to have a slick website at all, because you're not going to have people who are buying from you directly. You're not having people who are coming to you. In fact, you probably don't want people to come to you because actually your relationship is entirely wholesale. So that would be one sort of example within horticulture and probably other primary industries as well, where you're a farm selling to Fonterra, you probably don't have a website. But there aren't that many like that. I think the one that for me is a real standout that we don't have enough information is on health practitioners. So doctors, dentists, physiotherapists, counsellors. A lot of people are only on sort of aggregated sites. You could find them on you might have a doctor's name, but it's on a sort of a directory, as opposed to talking about who the doctor is, what's their philosophy, how long have they been a doctor, what's the background. Because increasingly we're getting very interested in our healthcare practitioners, the types of healthcare they provide. They're not all doctors or not all dentists or not all physiotherapists are the same. So I think we have a big gap there. There's a lot of people who still don't have their own website when they're actually offering really important services to the public. And even if you have a full book, like for example, a doctor who has no more space for a patient, it's still important to continue to have a profile, because over time people will move on, people leave the area, you will be replacing patients. And so, if you're in that sector and you don't have a web presence of your own, you really probably do want to have something that feels contemporary, it feels like it's up to date, they know who you are. It is it's a service that has high level of trust. So having a kind of a presence is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when, we're becoming more empowered as people with our own health. And you want to, I think part of that is definitely, you would expect your service provider would also be very authentic, and the human essence of the level of the engagement you're going to have with them. You would be looking for just to see some of that before you start talking to someone or reaching out. You want to see that you've got the right doctor. And I think that's a very important point you've made. All right, so
actually Kate, I might just quickly elaborate a little bit more on that too. For example, if you're a mortgage broker, if you think about a mortgage broker, you're probably going to be giving them some of your most personal information. You're going to be sharing your date of birth, your income, potentially insurance policies, how much you spend in your family, different things so you are really going to be spending a lot of time with them in the process of looking for a mortgage, but also handing over really detailed information. And I wonder how many people would go straight to a mortgage broker without knowing who they are, what's their background, what's going to happen with that data, because that data not only sits in a database somewhere on their website potentially, but it's also on their phone. And so if someone doesn't have, for example, a double authentication on their phone, and someone picks it up and gets goes straight into their emails, potentially they could find all that data on you that's sitting there. And so I think you have to preempt worst case scenarios. Whatever you do, if you're holding anything that's to do with personal information, having a website that actually talks about how much you take privacy really seriously, and how you look after or you delete things that are no longer needed, or you store it securely. And so that as the market gets more sophisticated and your clients get more sophisticated and those questions get asked, you're not scrambling thinking, oh gosh, what am I doing with all that information and where does that data sit? And so again, having something like a really professional website gives people the ability to see things and decipher what you prioritize. So if you're a mortgage broker and you really are talking about security, safety, and privacy of data, you're probably going to feel a lot better than if you don't see that. And so there's a very savvy group of first-time home buyers, for example, who will be asking these questions because they've grown up in a world where data and security, privacy has become such a big thing.
Absolutely. And I think as well as if you are a mortgage broker and you're looking to get more business, I'd say it's a very worthwhile step to be able to communicate those, as you speak to those fears and speak to those concerns of your clients, and that you'll probably find that you'll probably get more inquiries just for the matter of seeming safe and that you're taking their best interests and their security. Importantly, you've made, you've done the research and you've taken the steps to secure everything for them. So that's really awesome. Good point. That was great.
Actually, on security, hopefully a lot of you on this call have used the Checkable tool before. And actually, if you have a website, you've run it through to find out the full diagnostics. The free, it's still an amazing tool that I just can't believe is entirely free, which gives you the ability to really understand your site. One of the most important questions you get asked and tested first is, do you have a current SSL certificate? And that's the little thing in the icon and the search bar where your web address or your URL will show, and it will have like a little padlock. Now, I went yesterday to a job site getting in some information for a project we're doing, and I found a job site that didn't have a current SSL certificate, which meant that people were going onto a job site uploading information, but their SSL certificate had expired. And I actually knew the person who ran the site, so I contacted them and said, hey, do you realize? And they were like, we had no idea it had expired, because they don't really look for that type of thing. So even little subtle things when you have a website, you need to make sure it's a small price to pay every year to make sure that your site is secure to transact on or to load personal data in whatever form that might be.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Digital Boost, we've been going for about 2.5 years now, and we have over 60,000 users. What are some of or do you see any specific trends or outcomes from that? What's happening, especially at the moment lately? What's been sort of the biggest trends that you've seen developing?
Yeah, so we get there's a number of research that's done every year, both by Digital Boost as a government agency. They do independent research just to understand the shifts in behaviours across the people who use Digital Boost. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But there's also a number of very in-depth studies done every year, and the likes of MYOB, Xero, Yellow, which is the old Yellow Pages, New Zealand Post do it on e-commerce trends. And what we've seen across the last few years is there's been a really big lift in the number of people who have digitized. But the people who, for example, on Digital Boost, who go onto Digital Boost at least once a month or more, have digitized much faster than someone who goes in, only maybe once every couple of months. Right. And so those who go on really regularly have seen the greatest lift in revenue. So there's a direct correlation between digitizing and revenue. And there'll be another research, there's one that's just coming out very soon, which we'll share back with people who are users of Digital Boost to show that. But I think that the biggest trend is if you don't digitize, the productivity gains slip backwards. You typically work longer hours, you have less free time, and your growth of revenue is typically massively disrupted. So the reason why so many people digitize, and particularly if young people who are starting businesses who are much more confident, digitally savvy, they're what we call digital first. They'll often think about building their business online first without any consideration to physical spaces. Working remotely is obviously something that many people have really embraced. And so they can be a fully virtual business using all the digital skills and having all the presence and credibility without ever opening their doors to a physical space where either staff or customers come in the door. And so it's really about, if you're an existing business, what have you got that has sort of been the same practices for a long time? Like, what hasn't shifted? Is there anything that could be digitized that could help that process? It could be a procedure. It could be how you think about logistics or procurement. Could you do that easier through digital channels? It might be the way that you reward good customers. You might give them, other rewards by having third-party. It could be value items or vouchers or things. Like, a lot of the stuff that people are doing in digital is only possible because it's online. The second you go into a physical environment, it gets really tough to do a lot of these things, particularly if you're not capturing customer data. And so one of the most difficult conversations I have regularly is small business owners who hope to sell their business. And it's a really interesting thing. There seems to be this general idea that on retirement or retirement of the business, they'll get somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. It sort of feels like that's the window that people have in their mind. And when I talk to them about what we call intangible assets, how many things that do you have? How many databases do you hold? How many social handles of social media do you have, and how active are they? How many customers do you know, their history and the likelihood of them buying again next week or the week after because of what they've done before through some form of prediction or predictive analytics? How many things do you have that are, for example, your payroll, your accounting systems, your procurement? How many of those things are automated? Because someone coming in to buy a business today is looking for those intangibles and almost not looking at the tangibles, such as, oh, you have a physical shop, or you've got a branded truck, or you've got stock. because those things have a unit cost of value. So if you just go, your truck is worth $80,000 or $10,000, depending on what kind of truck it is, your stock, of which only half of it I'd want to even use, I'm going to put a value cost less 50% because it's not stock that I would hold. And then you don't have any much more than that. Your value of your business could be incredibly low by comparison to expectations. And so there are, more people closing their doors without the ability to on-sell their business than what they'd hoped. They had this idea after, many years and sometimes a lifetime's worth of work, a business would be worth something. But without those digital aspects, including a very comprehensive website and the database and the process that go with that, the valuation is much smaller. So you move away from a sort of a tangible valuation to an intangible, which has many multiples times higher, because the second you have a database, the value of that database is significant, particularly if it's up to date and you know the buying and purchasing behavior of the people who are on it. And they may not purchase, there may be a client who comes in for physio, but actually if someone's coming to the business, they need to be able to take over that business in its fullest sense without having to go to paper files or not knowing how often, or is it still up to date, and all those things that come with it.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, especially for personal brands or for services where you are, in some ways the biggest asset in your business, and then moving on or selling it, suddenly you're not part of that to somebody else, that's a big factor as well. And I think that's something that's really worth thinking about when you set something up, being like, well, if I was to move on and I was to sell this, how much am I putting into this? How much of this is about my personal brand and how much is it the service, and trying to keep, really healthy balance between that.
Yeah, it needs to operate when you're not there. Yeah, and particularly if it's a business that operates unusual hours or extended hours, like retail, where you might have late nights or Saturdays and Sundays. Obviously people coming in need to know that they don't have to be there all the time. I mean, people are trying to work less, not more.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to get a couple of questions here from Paul in the Q&A. Maybe just quickly jump into those if you're okay.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So Paul, so reading here, you design and make wooden toy stables and farm buildings, which I just love the sound of that, and the flat packed. So I'm assuming these are like in some kind of like a balsa wood or something like that. But in terms of selling them, the beginning would be, obviously, assuming you've found your market and the market who buys these toys. I think it's really important to, are they families? Are they grandparents? Are they schools? Are they, play groups? Like, if you've figured out where your sort of sweet spot is, it's then saying, where do you find those people? And so, if you just discovered it was, schools in the early years or play groups or kindergartens, then obviously you know where they are. So you'd be far better off targeting them, even in traditional media. You might go knocking on some doors, you might go and send flyers, but I think you could also do things like create a video, show kids making these stables and these farm buildings, and send little videos and social media out targeting. So you'd choose, for example, if it was on Instagram, which would be a great channel, or maybe Facebook, targeting those groups. So you target people who work in early childhood education, and you would really go, okay, where are those people? So the great thing about social media is you can get very, very microscopic, and you can choose anywhere in the country or the world. If, for example, it's grandparents and you really need to find out where they are, the same thing applies. Have a good website, make sure it's really very visual. People who are buying for someone else, like grandchildren, they want to see kids playing with the item. They want to see the excitement and joy. So it doesn't have to be complex, but you do need an e-commerce site. So it would be a very simple, show the products, multiple different angles, make sure they're well photographed and they can see the benefit, not just the photograph in its finished sense, but if you can show an image or two with kids playing with them, got their little plastic animals or whatever it might be, bring that emotive piece through, make it really easy to put into the shopping cart and to actually purchase that item, and then make sure you've got great logistics so that can be packaged up and out the door within 24 hours at the latest. Same day is perfect if you can. And so thinking about also, are they going to go offshore or just domestically? If it's just domestic, you don't have to think about duties and all the taxes and other things. So you might start there. If you're starting to find that your market is, say, in the US, you need to be able to have the ability to send and make people aware they're going to pay duties or not pay duties. So make sure you understand the implications if you're sending quite high value items offshore. But a website will be really important either way, but they're much more important if you're selling to a consumer as opposed to someone who's buying it for, like I say, into a daycare center would be a little bit different. And then in terms of the Google business, if you're fully online and don't have a location, which is, so many businesses these days, you can still put, if you're working from home and you're happy to have your home address, then that's fine. You might have a garage that you work from that people can come to. But if you're fully online and you literally don't want anyone turning up at your door, which is totally fair and reasonable, then actually you will need to get a website and actually create that. Understand that people know who you are, that reputation, because no one's going to buy from someone unless you're in a market without actually feeling that it's safe to put their money or their credit card into your website. So if they can't find anything about you, you're not on Google My Business because you're working from home and you don't have a website, and you've seen someone's picked up a flyer or they've heard about it, you're taking a huge risk by giving someone a credit card. So I would definitely say in that case, create the website, give the validation, the reputation. You can put a map on there with an address, and you might have an address that's just your whatever your sort of office address is, which might be your accountant's office, it might be your registered office there. Obviously, they don't want people turning up at their door either, so you need to be clear about what that address is. But yeah, so it's about where do you want people to know to validate who you are and how legitimate you are as a business, and how people can also get recommendations and referrals. And so the other way to do that is to use a third party to put your products onto the likes of an Amazon, or there are many marketplaces now that it could be in Etsy if it's beautiful handcrafted types of materials, and you can use another platform, and then the validation comes from people who have purchased from you, who have happy, they've given you a 5-star rating, have said how wonderful you are, and then suddenly by the time you've got 5 or 10 of those ratings, people start trusting the ratings, and that's not so important that you don't have a website. So people are just looking for trust, and people are deeply suspicious about giving their credit card to something they can't find anything about. And so having an online presence in whatever form it is to be discoverable is really today the equivalent of seeing a shop and walking in the door saying, okay, I can see this is a well-run shop and I trust to give my money over. Of course, online you have a delay between handing over your money and actually getting the benefit of the product.
So yeah, absolutely. And I was going to add to that as well and say that, there are some, especially like mail out platforms, if you're going to do any email marketing, that they won't allow you to create a template for a mail out without you having an address down the bottom as well, for a lot of these reasons. That's how important it is. And same with that as well. There are also some website platforms when setting up checkout and everything like that. You need to have a physical address for them to be able to enable you to actually process any credit card payments and things as well. So that's also something to be aware of.
Yeah. And Amy, I'm going to assume you're Amy, on the messages saying about having Pinterest as well. And I think it's another great example, where you can get an international audience, drive a following, anything that's visual. If you've got a visual product and something you're selling it's beautiful, then actually Pinterest is, Etsy's great, Instagram, all those platforms where you can get to show the beauty of what you create and really play on those gift ideas, something you treasure and gift to someone else. It's really great.
Absolutely. And I guess, Frances, there'll be a lot of people out there who probably for their own, individual personal reasons have different forms of reluctance to digitizing. What would your advice be to someone who just needs a little bit of extra encouragement to do that? What would you say?
Okay, it's a good question. I think the big thing for me is succession planning. So if you're in a business, what is your exit? Is your exit retirement? Is your exit at the point in time when the kids go back to school and you're going back to a sort of a day job? Is your exit when you have the ability to create enough revenue from the business that you want to sell it to someone else? Or, whatever. And people have very different. Some people say, well, I don't ever want to have a bunch of staff. I don't want to be responsible. So by the time it gets to 5 people, I want someone else to have it. Others will have this view, I'm going to create a business of value and then sell it at retirement. Now, one of the challenges with when people are reluctant, there is unfortunately a general correlation between age and digitization. And we do still need to really support our small business owners who typically are middle age and above, because most people start businesses in that age group, much more so than young people who actually don't start as many businesses as we may imagine. And so if you are in an age group where you're thinking, okay, I'm going to retire at 65, I'll just get my business to that point and sell it. It comes back to the point I raised before, is what will people buy? What is it they're going to buy? Is it tangible and intangible? How many digital, automated, how many things are they buying that actually enable someone to come in and say, okay, this is not going to take over my life by taking on this business. I'm not going to be consumed by it every single day. Even if you as a business owner have been willing to do that, it's been your labor of love because you love what you do. You know, you run a fruit and veggie store. It's been in your family forever. You love that process. You love the kind of conversation. You're happy to be there 7 days a week. Someone coming in, the chance of them wanting to do that is probably unlikely. It's not their dream. It's their business. And so you have to think about someone who's prepared to pay for something that they don't have to have huge vested time. And so small and medium businesses are much more popular with people who have other kind of other businesses. Like they might have two, husband and wife, for example, who might both have a business, often have young children. And so they'll be thinking about, how do I do this with all the other things that go on in my life? And so if you think about that, is when you think about that point of exit, work backwards and say, what can I do today to digitize so that by the time I exit, it does have a really well supported website that people can order from 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world. We do have those digitized systems, and we have procurement where I can just do an order. It's really simple. It's automated. It goes out. I do have, automatic invoicing through an accounting program. I do have, automated payrolls, whatever it might be. Like, there's a whole bunch of things here. Now, if you do that, then you'll start investing because you'll see the return on the investment is going to come at the point of sale. And so that's one really good reason. If you're trying to sell, then incredibly important you do that. The other consideration, which often people don't think about, is if you're retiring and say your dream is to retire somewhere between 60 and 65, which a lot of people do, the longevity of life now, and within Aotearoa, it's totally reasonable to think that most people without underlying health conditions will live to be 80, 90, late 90s. And so there is going to be potentially 25, 30, 35 years of life. So even if you're thinking, if I don't digitize, not the end of the world, I won't get as much money when I retire because the business won't sell as much, but actually I'll be happy in retirement. We know that money doesn't go very far. And so if there's 35 years ahead and you're trying to retire on a business sale, you want to make sure that business is maximized. So you might want to bring in some people who really know the stuff early. So you start transitioning the expertise and the knowledge you need to sell your business with someone who perhaps is really digital, and you kind of work on it together about how you get your business really top shape to really be able to sell that business through at the time you want to exit. On the other hand, if you just want to run a business for a period of time and then exit it because the kids are going back to school, or you plan to go into full-time employment, or you want to reduce the amount of work, then the same thing applies. The digitization is often put off because people say, well, it's not a serious business, it's kind of a side hustle. It's just something I do on the side. But if you take what you earn and you divide it by the hours a week you spend on it, if that's all it is to you, most people are probably better off going and getting a job, because actually you take away all the stress and all the kind of anxiety of running a business and all the responsibility. So when you go into business, I always say to people, you want to get that lift. You want to get people who value what you've done, and they see by coming in at whatever point it is that they will benefit from the work you've done, so they don't have to do it. And so the digitization piece, mostly when we talk to people about why they haven't and why they don't have a website and why they haven't got their systems, it's because they say it's too expensive, so that they're not seeing that return on investment, that they actually the benefits it brings both short term and long term, or they say it's because it's really intimidating. Now, the good thing is there's lots of people out there who can help, and I think it's not as complex as what some people imagine. And often there are regional, business advisors. There is, obviously platforms like Digital Boost who can help. There are people within your family or community that probably can help. All I would say is, if you're getting other people to do things, make sure that you hold the key. And when I say the key, you have the passwords to the social media accounts. You know who to contact with the website if it needs any changes. You have all the access, because one of the other things I hear is people who've been really badly burnt, that they've had someone who's gone ahead and actually got social media set up, and they've had Twitter set up, and they've had their Instagram, and all these things have all been set up, and then suddenly someone comes along to want to change things, but the person who developed those handles and those has disappeared or can't remember. And so to get those back from Facebook is nearly impossible. So hold the keys for anything you do, because that's the value. If you don't have the keys anymore, the keys to your Facebook or the keys to your LinkedIn account or your keys to your website, you don't have that value. So be really careful on that one. So that would be, the two biggest things: time, money, and then kind of like the intimidation factor are the reasons people generally don't.
Yeah, awesome. I was going to say as well, before we go into the next question, should we talk a little bit or do a little bit of an intro into what's happening at the moment in the world of generative AI and what that means to businesses before we go into the next question, just to sort of do a bit.
Yeah. And look, actually, Mariana has just asked the question about generative AI and that content. So let me sort of start with that question. So thanks for that. The question reads, do I need to worry about hiring freelancers that use generative AI to create content which is not protected by copyright? What should I do about this? Look, I am a massive advocate for generative AI and have been an AI sort of specialist for many years. It doesn't mean I'm not very cautious about where it's going and how fast it's changing. It is a tool today. It's not protected by copyright, but actually most stuff is not protected by copyright, because unless you can prove it's original, actually it's very, if I write a post today on LinkedIn, trying to prove it's my copy is not something, it's not a threshold I normally have to prove. I mean, unless I legitimately took it off someone else and claimed it as my own. So when you are putting copy into, say, for example, ChatGPT, it's using predictive language. So it's using a large language model. I'll try not to get too technical. It's saying everything it knows about what's written before September 2021, and you're asking a question, and say, for example, it's saying, what is the best way to clean my gumboots? So you've got that question, and ChatGPT gives you a step-by-step how to clean your gumboots. It's only bringing that based upon across millions and millions of data sets that of other people who have gone online or somewhere talked about cleaning their gumboots. And so the copy it creates is original because it's a mishmash of things from before. And so if you took that and you try to find the exact sequence of words, you'll never find it. And in fact, if you put the same question back as a prompt straight back into ChatGPT as a new search, it will give you another response. And so actually the copyright issue is really interesting. It has been challenged with music. At the moment, there is a couple of professional musicians in the world are challenging the right for other musicians to create music indicative of their style. And it hasn't gone through a full legal process yet. Now, that's a little bit more high-reaching when you've got, say, a musical style, an artist or a rapper, for example, or like there's one recently with Drake, or you might have something with an artist who's actually a painter, and you could go in and say, I want to have a painting of, the Wellington Beehive in the style of a particular artist. And if that artist is still living and it's clearly their style, then obviously there's a question around whose IP is it, and actually, is it copyright? I think right now, those things are still very grey and actually very, very hard to test. And there's a period a few months ago where every second call I was fielding felt like it was coming from media asking me about plagiarism and cheating with generative AI in the school system. And actually, the challenge they had is they were standing down students without any evidence that the student had used generative AI. And of course, if they said they didn't use it, there's no way of actually knowing if it has been. There's a few telltale examples where you might go, that looks like it because the student doesn't normally write that way, but it's not as clear as running a sort of some form of plagiarism checker across it, because they are not foolproof. So I think, long story short, if you've got people who are using generative AI, one, I think everybody is. I think it's a massive lift in productivity. You should always rewrite whatever you create, because you're going to have your own tone, your own business, kind of like the values, the use of words which you may or may not use. I mean, if the predominant entry of large language models is American, then you're going to get American spelling, American phraseology. You're going to have things that don't make sense. But fundamentally, it's a great tool. Use it, check it, check if it's got anything that could be, fraudulent, because it does have this unfortunate characteristic which it hallucinates. And so sometimes we'll create completely fictitious features. For example, it might be saying, you've got an amazing product that, it's a chair that can transform into a high chair, and suddenly ChatGPT will tell everybody it can transform into a lounge suite because it decides that it's seen other chairs that convert into high chairs, which also become lounge suites. So it does have this hallucinogenic kind of aspect to it, but the vast majority of what is being generated out of ChatGPT or any other generative AI tool technically is in this area where it's not, it is new, and you should then overlay another level of personalization before you post and make sure that it is true to what your business is, and so that you're just using it as a tool to help you get to the end point, as opposed to it is you take it verbatim, take it out, and then plop it straight back into your website and say, it's all good, someone else has written it for me. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Is there anywhere that you would recommend people go if they wanted to learn a little bit more about, resources online about how AI, and especially if you're in the industry that uses design and visual creativity, is there any resources or anywhere people can go to read up and just sort of?
Yeah, and look, actually, Kate, you may not be aware as well, but last week we launched a whole series on Digital Boost on ChatGPT, so that was a good kind of segue.
Yeah.
Both on terms of using it for writing, using it for creating art or creative assets. There's quite a few there which are designed sort of medium to advanced level for people who want to use them. But look, actually, there is an abundance of, if you want to get a little bit deeper into it, if you look at things like LinkedIn Learning. I know some of my team here have been using LinkedIn Learning to kind of understand things like the ethics of AI or things like copyright. So there is really great resources online. Just make sure that the resource it's coming from is legitimate. It's not just some great marketer hustling to get business and you watch a whole lot of stuff and at the end they're selling you something. So just make sure it's a learning program.
Yes.
And a lot of them are free, of course. So looking at those sort of bite-sized learning. But I think the thing is with generative AI, it is our future. It is, it's so significant in terms of what it will do. The biggest thing you need to know about it, though, it's the prompt that you ask that is the most important thing. It's not about the quality of the response is going to be based entirely on the quality of the question. So I'll give you an example. If you were saying, I'm looking for a present for my mum for Mother's Day, what should I buy her? You will get a terrible answer because they know nothing about your mum. So what you would probably say is, I am based within Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm looking for a Mother's Day gift for my mother who is 75 years old. She loves her garden. She lives alone. She loves things like preserving apples and pears. She has 3 cats. She has, put as much detail as you possibly can, and saying, and the value of the gift should be no more than $80, say. Now you've got context. I know the age of your mum, the things she likes. She has a house. She loves her animals. They have a price range, and they know it's New Zealand. What you get from that is going to be so much better. And the same thing is if you were planning a holiday, which is another wonderful thing that it does, is you wouldn't just say, I'm thinking about going to Queenstown. What can I do? You might say, I'm traveling from Wellington to Queenstown. I'm flying. I've got 5 days. I've got 2 children. The children are this age. I've got my mother-in-law. Talk about what you're looking for and saying, I'm looking for events and experiences in this price range that, that can be done in winter. And you give all the detail. And then you're going to get this whole, raft of options, in many cases with prices, although they will be back in September 21, they'll give you much better detail. So the mistake a lot of people make is they put these very generic prompts, they get very generic responses, and you can spot that copy a million miles away. Yeah. It just feels like something that's gone through a filter of some kind of weird robotic system.
It'll raise a few red flags within your own discernment about authenticity. So
I think it's one of those things. I mean, people will be using it, so there'll be a point where people might ask, is this written by a generative AI? And you'd have to say, yes, it is. If it is, I think we'll get more and more accepting of that over time. Like in the end, when we went from doing research in a library to going and researching through Google, we didn't say to people, I researched this in Google. It was accepted that people use the most modern tools that you can to do the job, so it's the most productive way of producing it. In the same way that, generative AI right now can write radio ads and create the videos and do all the visuals all within a few seconds. And there are radio stations that are doing that because they're saying, well, if we can make ads faster, we can turn it around. Our customers and clients are going to be happier because they get something better, faster, cheaper. And so, we have to, but, there's an assumption if you're not using it, then actually you don't get that productivity gain or the financial benefit of doing things faster and buying back a bit more of your time.
Absolutely. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to cover up a few more about digitizing your business questions, and just talking a little bit more because we were talking about shopping cart and online, having your website. What is when is adding e-commerce the right choice for your business?
Yeah, I think going back to sort of at the beginning in terms of what you're selling. So just probably good to reiterate this. It's not just about products, it can be services. And then you have to have an array. And in fact, there was a very, I won't actually name the site, I don't even know it's still live, but there was a New Zealand site that we were looking at early in the year as a group, doing a bit of a case study internally. And it sold many different things, from fertilizers to sort of hydraulic pumps to all sorts, but it had a shopping cart and almost everything in it would have weighed, somewhere between sort of 50 kilos and, a ton because of what it was selling. And it didn't have a shipping option. And so it was sort of like, so you had to be in the small town that was selling it. And so the question would be, is there enough people in the small town that were selling it? It was a population of, say, 10,000 who would go online, order these large industrial products, pay for them in advance, and then go and pick them up. And it felt like someone had sold them a website when actually, if you're in a small town and you need to go and pick up something that weighs 50 kilos, you're probably going to drive this, look at it, talk to the guy or the woman who runs it and say, tell me about this product because I'm about to spend some money. It's going to go in the back of my ute. So that just felt like a case where someone had sold them a site and the dream of people are going to come pick up these huge big bags of fertilizer and buy it online. Probably they wouldn't. And I suspect over time that would have had very little traction. The flip side is I'll often go and find a website where it's got beautiful products and it shows the range and it will show, all the features and benefits of these beautiful products, which may be organic and lovely, but no ability to order them. Or it might say you can find stockists, which are these stockists here, and then you have to go to a next step to find them. So, I think that there's an expectation now, if you are selling things that can be shipped and can be put into a shopping cart easily, they're not breakable. It's not so easy to send things to the glass or mirrors and things like that, but things that are easy to package, easy to send, certainly within the same geographic market, then you should have e-commerce. If you don't have those products, you don't have anything that's productized, or they're too big or cumbersome, or you're in a niche, then don't have them. Don't have them for your apples that are selling as wholesalers, or you're a wholesaler. And a service that is very bespoke. So say, for example, you were wanting someone to write a report to respond to a tender document. You're not likely to put that onto a website as a e-commerce because, if someone said, oh yeah, I do want you to write a report for a tender, it's like, how many words, when is it due, how much industry knowledge do I need? So when there's many variables, you also wouldn't put it there. You would only talk about, a really great contact form. So expressions of interest, contact us, sign up for a newsletter, anything you can to get those emails so that you have them on a database and a phone number and an email so you can contact them back and say, hey, I see you're on our website, let's talk through what you're looking for. But it's so important to have that. It's amazing how many people to find the contact us. It's almost, it's a pop-up box that you have to email and you're like, I just want to phone someone. I just want to see if you can do this.
Yeah.
So don't hide away behind a contact form. Most people are not very tolerant of contact forms, so they don't even know where the person is and they can't pick up the phone and talk to them about something they're looking at buying or trying to understand about the options that they have.
Yeah,
You know,
and
so
I was going to say as well, like a phone number is so important because there's also, depending on who your audience is, but there'll be a lot of people who just want to send a text message as well. So I've seen quite a few websites now will actually have that option as well. But send us a text or give us a call, because basically you want to be able to say you're accessible to as many people as possible in as many ways possible, basically.
Yeah. And of course, if different markets, you might have WeChat if you've got a Chinese market, or your WhatsApp if you've got, like you may have other things that you can do. Of course, and then more and more people are integrating chatbots and things, so that even when they're not, online, that they're actually getting data back and be able to contact it, even if it's just saying, hey, give us your details, we'll contact you first thing in the morning. People feel like there's a response. I think the other thing is an autoresponder is super important, which is you've just ordered something. So you've just spent $120 buying some amazing products, and then you get no email confirmation. There is this anxiety that comes with it. You need to know that by the time you've pushed the final confirmation, they pop up on the screen saying, yep, payment successful, done. You want to go back to your email and find an email there saying, hey, thanks, Francis, this is your order. It'll notify you when shipping commences, etc. You need that reassurance that you're responding to, that you've got something. And that's just as important if you're lodging a query.
Yes.
I think all of us have done that. You've found what looks like the perfect provider for some service you need or a product. You email them saying, just confirming, can you do this, or what's your price for this? And you get radio silence. You get no responder saying, thanks for your query, we'll come back to you first available opportunity, or we'll be back in touch with you tomorrow morning. Total radio silence, which I would say is probably more than 50% of all businesses do not have an autoresponder for queries. And so then the next day you go, what was that company that I did that web lodged contact? Can't remember, gone. So you've just lost a customer because they don't have the ability to remember unless they go back through their history to find out where they were, which 2 or 3 days may have passed by that stage, making it very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say as well, that kind of ties in with social media. So how important are social media channels for small businesses? What would you, and I guess when would that become even more important, especially if you're digitizing and you're looking at having a website? How can social media help?
Yeah. So social media is there to bring that immediacy. If you can't change your website regularly, that's where social media is great. You put what's happening today, or at least this week, in your business. And so if your website is only updated every few months, you need to make sure you've got very prominent links to your social media. So they go, what are you doing? What's the new product? What's happening in your business? Now, depending on what you sell, the choice of social media platform will be quite different. Obviously, if you're in business consultancy, you're going to be all over LinkedIn, and you'll be trying to do that. Same if you're a mortgage broker or you're selling insurance. I mean, anywhere where there's a professional service, LinkedIn. If you are selling beautiful handmade cakes and bespoke wedding options or whatever it is, you're going to be all over Instagram and probably Pinterest and really showcasing that experience. If you're selling things that are high fashion, influencer driven, again, they're going to be very likely to be on Instagram. Facebook is taken a bit of a hit. It's still very popular, but it's more popular with an older audience in some categories. Like, for example, I know that teachers love Facebook. So if you want to reach teachers, it's really great to go. For education, that's sort of like a residual, a hang on, and maybe it's linking with students. I don't know what it is, but they're not so big on LinkedIn, for example. We've now, Twitter has had a massive hit, and I think that probably you wouldn't want to be starting your experience with Twitter right now. We've got Threads, the new Instagram, Facebook option. So Meta is now launched. It's, a couple of days ago, it's already have 100 million users. So it's definitely the fastest growing social media in the history of mankind. So check out Threads. So you can go on there. There's also Blue Sky, which is another Twitter platform which has come out. It is only by invitation, but it's kind of seen as the sort of the elite type version of what Twitter was. So if you're selling services which are kind of in, professional services, research, you're trying to feel like a real specialist, a subject matter expert, you'd probably use the likes of a Threads or a Blue Sky. And then, TikTok, of course, if you're selling anything at all to do with youth, and I mean youth in a very broad sense, anyone who's youth adjacent too. So people who love fun things, fun food, fun clothing, fun music, fun experiences, because it's about movement, action, activity. So, you don't want to be going on there yourself if you're not comfortable in front of the camera. This is definitely the platform to get the extroverts in your team or your family to be fronting and bringing huge energy, because it cuts through. It's probably what we call the stickiest of all the platforms. It's the one that young people particularly spend more time on than any other. So pick your platform carefully and just back one or two really well. Don't try to do them all, because you're just not going to be able to do it all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Have you seen that question there from Paul? So about Meta allows your Insta post to be auto cross posted to your Facebook page. Are we seeing something like that with Threads? Do you want to?
Well, with Threads is just text, so it's still character. I don't know how many characters they've gone with, but it's still very much like Twitter. So, so when you think about it, it's not going to be a post as such, but you may take content and cross-populate. Now, I have heard, I can't validate because I haven't yet checked it out. If you sign up for Threads, there's been noise around this that actually you sign up through Instagram. If you try to cancel Threads, it actually forces you to cancel Instagram. Whether this is a trick to get people signing up and not opting out so they can really grow like they have grown so fast, or whether it's just a short-term anomaly, or it could be fake news. So I'm not going to hold you to that, don't come back to me. They go, no, it didn't do that. I've had enough people tell me that is the case in the last 24 hours to make me think that probably is the case. So
strategy.
But I haven't signed up yet to Threads, so I can't actually validate it, but it's probably one of today's things to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll check it out later as well. And thank you everybody for your participation and for being here. If anyone has any questions as well around anything, you can email us at support@digitalboost.co.nz and we can point you in the right direction, especially to our videos that we have. And thank you, Frances. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful chatting to you.
It's such a pleasure. And I just hope everybody is going to have a wonderful day and actually enjoy the short week if you can.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Until next time. See ya. Awesome. Okay. Now, bye.